forgivable. Yeah, thanks a lot. It's nice to have the chance to kind of share some of my research, but I won't talk too much about the empirical work I've been doing, although, yeah, I can do that as well in questions. Just wanted to share some ideas that I've been playing around with that kind of connect all the Ilyenkov stuff with the day job. So there's lots of kind of preliminary ideas here, which I'll be very glad to develop with your support. So yeah, I'm going to talk for a while and then we'll hopefully have lots of time for comments and questions. Here's this nice illustration from betterinmagesofai.com. So one question which I'm interested in, which I'll be exploring in this presentation, is what the purpose of AI is. I'm going to be talking about this idea of agentic AI that there's lots of focus on right now. Then going back a bit in history to the computational theory of mind, and then thinking about Ilyenkov in the inorganic body of man and what the implications are for building an alternative. Seeing what AI is in an alternative way. So I like that Sam Altman has been quite open in giving a definition for this holy grail of general artificial intelligence. So this general artificial intelligence is when AI is like fully intelligent. So Sam Altman and his executives in the leaked email suggested that the definition of artificial intelligence is the ability to generate $100 billion in profits. So he's quite explicit that intelligence just is capitalism. And various authors have suggested that, in fact, is a kind of line that Deleuze introduces, which then people take up in an evil way, like Nick Land and Curtis. I've thankfully forgotten. Yarvin, that's his name, who's right now very influential on the philosophy of lots of these right-wing influences. So yeah, they agree that it is just capitalism, as Ilyenkov might suggest. Okay, so the criticism that Ilyenkov gives at the end of his essay, which we shared about cybernetics, throughout the essay, he's saying, look, the technology of cybernetics is really promising. So the it's the ideology around it which is the issue. So Ilyenkov says people with higher education are pinning their hopes on the descent of some scientifically supervised ruler onto the sinful world because they have become rather disappointed in the wisdom of the living rulers. Supposedly, such one will come and will immediately adjust all human relations with mathematical precision, will calculate the proportion of production, will relieve from crises, it generally will establish heaven on earth, will even choose a suitable partner for everyone. So Ilyenkov saying this in sort of 1965, 1967, kind of anticipating a lot of what we have today, including kind of the ideology behind dating apps, and more pressingly, a lot of the way in which politics right now especially is panning out. So the next big thing right now is this idea of agentic AI, So this is where the large language models that we're currently used to interacting with, like ChatGPT, are packaged as agents. So they have their own personality, and then they are your personal assistant, and you get them to schedule your meetings, take minutes, book holidays for you, and sort of be a robot butler or slave. This is really the focus of a lot of money that they're trying to generate. So far, generative AI has not proven very profitable despite all the hype. But they think it will. And partly they're holding out for something like agentic AI. When they're explaining why they're going down this route, many of these top industry people are motivated by science fiction, and they're open about that. So I find it interesting that Ilyenkov's own engagement with this is in part through science fiction. So if you live in London, you've probably seen these adverts. So Artisan, the startup, stop hiring humans. The era of AI employees is here. And lots of these adverts taunting ordinary workers on their stressful morning commute to work. Ava took my job and did it better. 0 stars, etc. Now, this is interestingly completely science fiction. If you sign up for Artisan, it is just ChatGPT with extra prompts. It's not going to replace any worker. But interestingly, this is the expectation. So Keir Starmer, British Prime Minister, made the announcement recently that civil servants should be prepared for the fact that an AI may replace their role. So again, it's a really strange announcement to make because the technology isn't there. It's certainly not being tried. It's just holding out for the future technology to, I don't know, create some sense of precarity and anxiety that allows greater control. This from an interview in The Spectator. So Morgan McSweeney runs the British government. He's basically the most senior person after the Prime Minister. He's making up all the policies. McSweeney is exercised by the fact that civil service has 7,000 communications officers, 4,500 of whom work for arm's length bodies and quangos, and frequently attack what the government is trying to do. Like Dominic Cummings, he is infused by the possibilities of technology to speed change, such as AI in the NHS, or gamers being hired by the Ministry of Defence to fly drones. He is now experimenting with synthetic voters, essentially fake focus groups of AI voters who can tell ministers more quickly and cheaply what the public thinks of policies. The voters themselves can also be replaced, as Ilyenkov very much predicts in his 1960s essay. So I want to bring it back to my field, which is human-computer interaction. And there's a debate here that's been going on for a while between two paradigms near the birth of this wave of artificial intelligence, between direct manipulation and interface agents. So Schneiderman, who's a pioneer of HCI, the first, and Patty Mays, who's at MIT Labs, going for the second. So Schneiderman wants to promote direct manipulation, which is user control through direct interaction with on-screen objects using physical, incremental, and reversible actions, which you can see the effect of. So you're seeing what you're doing through visualization. I've also used audio for this, so you get kind of live sense of what it is that you're doing. The alternative interface agents is where The AI acts on the user's behalf by learning user preferences, automating tasks, and minimizing interruption of the user so that they're not needing to anticipate anything or particularly think about anything. And industry is very much on the side of Patty Mays with creating these agents. As we just saw, everyone's very excited about the future of agents. So yeah, I just finished this book that was quite interesting. Alan Blackwell, who's in charge of, he's the head of HCI at Cambridge University, has this idea that we should focus on developing languages instead of artificial intelligence. The thesis itself, I think, is interesting, that we should empower users to use languages in a sense of like accessible programming languages. The book is quite helpful in terms of empirical studies. It's not particularly philosophically rigorous, but yeah, I just thought it was interesting. It's a new contribution to the AI by direct manipulation approach, which is kind of what I'm arguing for as well. Okay, so how did we actually come here that people are obsessed with these agents doing everything for us? So I want to go back and focus where Ilyenkov focuses, which is the McCulloch-Pitts theory. Without going too deeply into it, so in the history of how we understand cognition, what McCulloch and Pitts suggested is that they could model a neuron mathematically. So using actually logical operators. So you've got like this, you can have this tape of episodes of zeros and ones, and then you can use that to model the logical operators and, or, and not. And what they claim is that this is what a neuron is doing. It has an input, and then you've got this stuff that it's doing at a junction, and then you get an output. So what this does is it turns a neuron into a formal system. So a neuron becomes something abstract. It's a machine of zeros and ones, and this is the birth of what still today is called the computational theory of mind. Now, there are lots of researchers that say, look, what we need to do if we're developing computers is we need to study how the brain works. So we shouldn't just be applying computer science to this. If we want artificial intelligence, let's look at how brains do it. So this is what pioneers of computer science like John von Neumann were saying. But the slight snag here is that they already approach their understanding of what the brain is doing as computer scientists with this kind of assumption that the brain is also a formal system. So, von Neumann, we should study the brain. What's the brain? The basic component of this system, i.e. the brain, is the nerve cell, the neuron, and the normal function of a neuron is to generate and to propagate a nerve impulse. And the nervous impulse can clearly be viewed as two valued markers. The absence of a pulse then represents one value, say the binary digit 0. The presence of one represents the other, say the binary digit 1. It is then to be interpreted as a marker, a binary digit 0, 1, in a specific logical role. So this is what Ilyenkov is talking about, this kind of slippage where actually they can't distinguish what is the human, what's the machine. So you have this kind of circular logic where what's cognition? Well, it's kind of like computation. What's computation? Well, it's kind of like cognition. And what both are really is, formula. So this focus on formalization is preserved to the present day. So as Ilyenkov says, the McCulloch-Pitts theorem is impressive in terms of what they do to introduce neural nets, and neural nets are very effective at dealing with logic and dealing with computation. But are they then something that we should apply to human thinking itself? That's what he's challenging. So him and Davidov and Arsenyev are throughout saying, look, we want to improve the design of cybernetic systems, and it's this ideological thinking, this mythological thinking, that's actually holding it back. And just a few things to highlight from this and Ilyenkov's other AI essay, The Mystery of the Black Box, is the one area is to do with purpose, to do with formalizing purpose, and the sense in which there's this circular definition of purpose, where what the machine is doing is carrying out a purpose, and what a human is doing is carrying out a purpose, and then it's kind of ends up kind of empty definition of purpose. Today, there's lots of we can talk about it later with paradigm like reinforcement learning, and indeed kind of what's happening with large language models to fine-tune them. There's this idea of that purpose is to do with my rank preferences, which are just apparent in my actions. I'm apparently constantly deciding between discrete options and assigning weights to them. The other problem, which is very interesting, is to do with contradiction and whether a neural net can deal with contradiction. Because, with a neural net, you have some setting of prior weights. And this prior configuration of weights is a taking of the world to be a particular way. So the thing which Ilyenkov is emphasizing is everything in itself is contradictory, and it's dynamic. We keep finding that the world outruns our representation of it. Whenever we represent it, that representation turns out to be contradictory in the sense that the phenomenon is dynamic. In Schelling's phrase, that nature is the corpse of understanding. I think when we look at this, and right now, the equivalent application of neural nets and associated approaches like there's lots of predictive processing or predictive coding approaches now, like my colleagues here at UCL, I've never spoken to them, but Carl Friston and Maxwell Ramstad have this kind of neural net view of the brain, where it's looking for invariant characteristic features, and you have this kind of model of the world, and you only see the world through the model that you create. But then if you're only seeing the world through the model, then that model picks out certain things about the world, and which obviously means that any model is kind of outrun by the world itself, and it means invariably that you're kind of reinforcing the model, because even though they claim it's very dynamic, I think we can see in practice that it leads to lots of reinforcement, and there's all kind of circular things about this kind of prior model which are predicting, and then what's kind of happening with if all you're seeing is the model of the world. Anyway, the alternative to doing this is to view neurons and the brain and not as kind of logic gates, but as part of wider systems of material causes. So Slavoj Žižek gives this example, so apologies for lowering the tone, but it's the best example I can think of. So if you can think of a less crude story, then go for it, but I'll blame Žižek. So he gives the story that he goes on a date, and when he returns from the date, he takes out his fleshlight sex toy, and his date takes out her vibrator, and she puts her vibrator in his fleshlight. So then, instead of wasting time having sex, they can stay up all night and discuss politics. Now, the point is that they haven't automated sex. In fact, no matter how advanced the fleshlight and the vibrator become, at no point will they have automated sex. Sex isn't going to emerge from this dynamic. I think similarly, when my colleagues are kind of worrying about, well, what if a large language model becomes conscious now and starts feeling suffering, for example, I think that might well be an empty target. Why expect that? This is something to do with our interaction with our environment. There's no kind of good reason, as Ilyenkov says, like we could reconstruct something like sex and how it relations to the environment, but why would we? That's just not the project that cybernetics and AI is engaged in. Okay, so what's the Ilyenkovian alternative to this? Oh yeah, I was going to say, so Alan Blackwell, whose book Moral Code I mentioned, has this good quip that general artificial intelligence is like general strength. It's kind of meaningless because, yeah, intelligence is relational and context bound. Okay, so an Ilyenkovian AI would not focus on the tool user dyad, but see AI as mediating social practices and social relations. So it would not be, to quote Ilyenkov, a system of indisputable rules of unknown origin. So what would it be like? Here I think we can turn to Ilyenkov's theory of the ideal. So Ilyenkov says, the architect built a house not just in her head, but with the aid of her head by way of representation directly on drawing paper, on the surface of a drawing board. By doing so, she changes her inner condition, bringing it into the open and acting with it as though with an object different from herself. Modifying this rarefied subjective inner image, she also potentially changes the image of the real house. That is, she changes it ideally in its potentiality. So I want to say that in the same way that the architect can think through architectural drawing or can directly think on paper, AI should be able to support our thinking. So instead of doing the thinking for us, it can be part of the organic body of humankind, where we incorporate what the AI is doing into our practice, so that we're thinking through the artifact. So current AI offers autonomous schemes that control action rather than being shaped by it. So the paradigm I'm proposing is that it's not about creating a map that is so accurate eventually that we can substitute it for the territory, not a mirror. So Shannon Valor has this great book, The AI Mirror, where she's kind of writing a lot about this. So if it's not a map, then, sorry, if it's not a mirror, then it's using the AI to shape the territory. So it's not that map equals territory. It's not about error minimization in this literal sense in which it's an image making itself directly apparent to us in this fetishistic way, but it's a way for us to manipulate, to shape, to reform our own life activity and the environment is grounding it and incorporated into it. So under this view, a model is a tool shaped through a history of purposeful use. So one reason why ChatGPT is so useful is because it's trained on our language, and our language already throughout history has been shaped by our purposes, by our intelligence. So it's no wonder that it appears so intelligent, in the same way that all of our tools have certain affordances that mean that we find them in ways that can complement our purposes. But of course, especially within just general run of capitalism, a lot of these affordances or nudges are used in ways that are alienating or that reinforce patterns that aren't expansive of our freedom. So we also need a focus on practical empowerment instead of this idea that an AI is going to become aligned with the algorithms of preferences that are going on inside of our heads, or the mental models that we have of the world. We can focus on how does the AI get incorporated. So some general design principles here. The first is to enable critical engagement so that users can examine and modify their own thinking processes by working through AI systems. So here, AI helps to materialize how they're thinking for themselves and others. So this is to allow collective reflection. In contrast to current approaches to explainability, it's not just about giving a static explanation. Here's the model. It's about making the practice, which is mediated by the AI, explicit. Not the mechanical model itself. So it's also just about supporting situated practice, so users develop repertoires of interaction with the AI. Lots of interesting work in this idea of participatory AI, where musicians using machine learning define certain effects using their bodily gestures that they can then use when composing music in real time. They create filters through a dynamic relation with the AI. They're kind of using back and forth, where they can almost feel out the texture of the AI, like a carpenter feeling out the grain of the wood when carving furniture or an instrument. And so this is about having AI that's iterative, supports processual engagement rather than being focused on these one-shot interactions, which is really like almost like the top focus for a lot of AI companies right now, or static explanations. So under this view, AI is material. It's seen as material, and of course it is material, and it's a part of our social infrastructure in the same way as writing, churches, and other institutions are. And as part of this, that means collective data curation. So we don't just have this magic formula of the AI perceives the world. We are kind of transparent about the fact that humans are doing lots of labeling and counting certain things as the world, labeling it in certain ways. So if this was more democratic and distributed, that would improve AI. And then lastly, preserving human agency. So not agents doing things for us by using models of our preferences. So it's something that's implicated within my practices, part of my practice, and rather than this kind of formalized model of my individual optimization function, It's about collective goal formation through negotiation. So AI architecture then is collectively owned and modified rather than individually consumed, supports ongoing social negotiation rather than preference aggregation, enables groups to examine and transform their own practices through technological mediation, and preserves space for conflict, disagreement, and collective deliberation. Yeah, so that's about it. Thanks. And so just a quick response to Ralph asking for that paper. I can't give you the reference for the extract from the paper that I shared, which, yeah, Andrea spoke last time, and Carl, who was at our Ilyenkov conference, our co-authors on. I kind of shouldn't have shared it because it's still under review. So yeah, I can't say much about it, and it will almost certainly be significantly revised. But yeah, in that paper, I talk a bit about my current ongoing project using AI to mediate solar energy communities. Right, any questions? Or...
Thank you, Kyrill. That was amazing. Yeah, questions are all welcome, either by putting your hand up or by writing your name in the chat. We have, we've got 45 minutes at least, so looking forward to your questions. Alex, I think you're the first. You're muted, Alex. Yeah.
Sorry, it took me a second to figure out how to raise my hand. I was raising my actual hand, and then I realized that's not good enough. It has to be my virtual one. So then I found it. Kyrill, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for that talk. I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to hearing what others think as well. I just wanted to, one thing just off the top of my head that struck me as you were talking, and I wanted to see what you think. How can I put this? I very much like how you explained that the most appropriate way of understanding these AI systems is not so much as kind of like replacements of humans, but rather as tools that we're using or that we will be using. And that impacts a whole set of issues, including alignment, as you mentioned, and it's a great way to kind of shift the entire discussion. And what I've noticed when I look at real world applications, like, because I look at, much like yourself and others as well, this stuff happens on multiple levels. Like we're looking at how we're discussing these issues, but then how this is actually being developed in the real world as well, and also implemented by the companies that are developing these systems. And there's still some talk about AGI and all of this stuff about AI becoming smarter than humans and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it seems like in practice, most of these AI systems in the real world are being implemented just as you described, in fact, as tools. They come they're implemented as part of our existing applications, for instance, most of the time in annoying ways that we don't want and things like that. I've yet to see any AI systems marketed as even intelligent robots in a way where you would have like a home robot companion on a mass scale, things like that. So it's interesting, like what you're describing here through the work of these theorists seems to be similar to conclusions that I guess the market itself has drawn, right? And in a certain sense, there's still this kind of discourse about creating super intelligence and all of that. But in practice, it looks like that is really not what's on the agenda. What's on the agenda is creating AI systems that are actual real world tools that people can implement and incorporating them into workflows and whatnot. But the one main difference, though, between what you're suggesting, obviously, and what they're doing is the collective ownership, of course, right? The whole purpose of the technology and whatnot. But that overall shift that you noted, I guess what I find interesting is that it seems like the business community, whatever you want to call it, the corporate world, the corporations that are developing this technology have themselves largely taken up that agenda, and that aside from some of the researchers, there are a few, I guess, Ilya Sutskever, for example, there's still a few of them who've started their own companies who are trying to create this, but for the most part, it seems like they're creating just applications, right? So I was curious if you thought of that. Sorry, I'll stop
Yeah,
there.
no, that's fair. That's interesting. That actually, practically, they're creating tools. But no, so I think the ideology which I'm describing is very widespread. It's not just small pockets that are focusing on agentic AI. It's very much the thing that's getting Silicon Valley excited. It's so yeah. I know big. One of the big AI companies is internally very excited about the idea that that their AI is going to be deployed in a meeting and will speak on your behalf so that you don't have to attend the meeting. It will act as you. It will be trained on your performances and then it'll act as you. The thing is, what they're trying to get investors' money for is this sort of stuff. So what they're practically doing is these little tweaks, but the idea is like, oh, but soon we'll leave all these little tweaks that aren't proving very profitable behind, and the real money will be when we've got these generalized systems, then people will really pay. So the mythology is totally with agentic AI. I don't see in terms of what they're publicizing very much on hey, that we can make this infrastructure more responsive. Let's I don't know, improve the water system. That's just, I can't even imagine AI startup doing that. The UK government has told the Alan Turing Institute, which is one of the leading AI research institutions, that they'll only receive money if the focus of research is shifted to defense. Within defense, there's a big focus on agentic AI in the sense of like, well, you send the robot to the battlefield, not the actual person. So that way, there's no kind of fatalities. So that's another place where it comes in.
Okay, we've got Ezekiel next, and then Paul, Simons, and then Yanis would like to speak.
Okay, thanks, Kyrill. I was thinking about your remarks about critical engagement and the development of the practical empowerment. And what that made me think is that this kind of how we lose agency when we confronted with AI is not just simply another case in which we lose agency with confronted with everything lately. All kinds of technologies, how we deal with social networks, how we deal with institutions, and so on and so forth. So I wonder if, on the one hand, there is a broader problem that is not just AI specific, which is, if you like, highlighted by the particular technology that AI is, which is and simulates being an agent, and that loss of agency becomes much more visible and much more obvious. But if it is the case, then it's not just about the technology of AI, it's about a broader problem, the problem of how we are not particularly aware of when we lose agency. And I can tell this, because I've been using AI quite a bit. And I notice there are moments where you are actually not really paying attention and you're just going with the flow, and you don't know what's going on. But there are moments when you think like, no, I want this to work in a particular way and I want certain results, and I will insist, and I will design my prompts and ask for specific data and so on, that you regain that agency. So even with this technology as it is possible, I believe, but this might have to be something that has to be practiced socially. It's not just simply, you may develop it on your own from experience, but most people will not. You can develop a regain, you can regain some agency. So that's one comment. And the other comment, because that comment, it fits with the idea of treating AI as a tool. However, I'm not so sure it's so obvious that it's just a tool, particularly because it's a tool that is prompting us to respond socially. We don't treat other people as tools. And this is presenting itself in the forms of discourse, in the forms of well-articulated language. And it's using, language, a corpus of human knowledge. So it's not just inventing things. I mean, sometimes it does, of course. So at the same time, there is something not quite tool-like to this sort of technology that or not comparable with other tools. Again, it points in the direction of the social dimension. So essentially, you have these two things. You may treat it as tools. Let's regain agency overall, and do it socially. Critically raise consciousness about how to regain agency. And in practice, and it can be done. And the other is, but it's not quite just, it's not like any normal tool, let's put it that way, any other thing.
Yeah, so I totally agree. Those are challenging issues. So I think, in terms of the first one, it's difficult in the sense in which actually our preferences, if we may call it that, are often something that we just find in the moment, not something that are kind of inside of us and are there to be matched or not matched. So quite often the AI will give us a response and it'll be like, yeah, that's done it. Where actually it's really kind of nudged us into a particular, retrospectively we desire or intend something that appears before us. And of course, that's in general under capitalism how it works. The presence of the can of Coke creates the preference for the can of Coke. And in the way that it's actually, there is all of this kind of reinforcement. So with something like the Spotify algorithm, which we are being presented with preferences, but actually in the background, we don't realize how it's reinforcing certain marketable genres. Everyone's getting the same songs on their Discover Weekly and being like, oh, this is just for me. So then, well, what do we do about that? So that's why I'm saying that if it was more responsive to our interactions rather than presenting this kind of being this epistemic fountain and end of knowledge in these eureka moments of like, aha, one-shot outputs, here is the full answer. That's part of the solution. Another one, yes. So there's something uncanny about interacting with it. It is literally reinforcing us to interact with it as a social agent. And my hope is that in the same way that we have certain norms for interacting with other agents, like with my cat, I wouldn't shout in front of a cat. I would not think twice about doing other socially puzzling things. I hope that we'll develop an attunement and a repertoire for engaging with the types of agents that something is. So if the focus stops being about everything's a general artificial intelligence, then we'll have an agent that's local to a particular system, like I'll have my holiday booking agent or whatever, and then I can develop repertoires for interacting with a holiday booking agent. And it can be designed so that the agent is transparently like being an AI agent and not pretending to be a helpful little guy. So it's kind of trained itself on all of these like science fiction examples of being the obsequious butler, and that I think that it need not be.
It's Paul Simons, and after that is Yanis, and then Ivan, and then Ralph. So we got a queue now.
Right.
Paul.
That's it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay. Yeah, just, I mean, following on from what Ezekiel said, that if, you know, you treat tools, you know, whether it's a tool or not, is that you treat tools as objects, whereas the difference between a tool and a living person is that you treat another person, or you should do anyway, as a subject, as a fellow subject, in the same way that you're a subject. And that's different. You wouldn't think of treating a garden rake as a fellow subject. It's just simply an object that you've got that's useful to you. And so if Ezekiel is saying that in a certain sense it's not a object in the same way, well, it's not quite a subject, so what the hell is it then? I think that's the kind of the area that I'd like to explore. But I'd like to ask a very specific thing as well, that if, I think it's in dialectical logic, Ilyenkov makes a very good sustained argument to the effect that AI, or cybernetics, I think is what he calls it, will never replace humans, or it can't actually replicate human consciousness. And he uses the example of like a pair of compasses, because he says that a pair of compasses can draw a circle much better than a human hand can. But that's all it can do. It can't do squares or triangles or anything else. Whereas and what he says is that therefore what defines the compass is its internal construction, the way it's built. Whereas what defines a human is the outside world, because our consciousness is a product of that world. And because the outside world is infinite, as far as we know, the universe is infinite, then at least in principle, human consciousness is infinite. Which I find a very convincing argument, but it's just a slight snag with that, in the sense that if you think of a AI system that is a learning model, then it isn't limited by its own internal construction, because its own internal construction, which includes its programming, is constantly changing by its own use. So where do we kind of go from there? It doesn't quite, you know, the argument the Ilyenkov put in that in dialectical logic doesn't quite follow.
Thanks. Yeah. So first, we treat tools as objects. I agree, and I certainly have found myself in the past saying please and thank you to ChatGPT. It is an object, so I think that's partly what we need to get over. It is, and to use John Hoagland's phrase, it doesn't give a damn. So remembering that the care it's giving for us, it has no skin in the game. It's kind of the outward force of it, and it can be treated as an object. It can be, if we don't like what it's doing, we can reconfigure it, we can change the model. Yeah, I mean, it does dynamically responds to aspects of the environment, that it's kind of yeah. I should say yeah. So as Eagles pointed out, that there are good reasons to be applied to AI that to do with constraining the genre of how it replies to you. So I've got a we've been designing a reinforcement learning model that models energy use behavior, for example. To do any reinforcement learning, I create an environment. So I'm creating something that's a model of the world, and whatever model I create, no matter how expansive, it will mark certain things as significant, and other things won't be represented there, and it will divide the world up into objects. So the world is not split into objects, the data of which you can read off. So although, yes, reinforcement learning is really good for dealing with unpredictable combinations and dynamic like combinations of different factors. And there's lots of really interesting kind of emergent effects in terms of the strategies that it comes up with. It is still, yeah, it's as you were alluding to in the Ilyenkov discussion, it isn't a form. Its form is not dependent on the form of its activity. So what it reads off the environment is not contributing to its maintenance of its life activity. And that's why it doesn't give a damn. And it's not shaping itself to the form. It's shaping itself to, yeah, what's being kind of predefined. So because of that, it is always lacking in this universality that Ilyenkov highlights. Okay, Ivan?
It was Yanis first, and then
Oh, sorry, Yanis.
Yanis, and then Ivan.
Thank
Sorry,
you very
Ivan.
much. Thank you very much, Kyrill, for your amazing presentation. A question and a comment at the same time, and you can expand further on this. My question is how you can how we can think, for example, from Ilyenkov's approach, the theories, the contemporary theories, philosophical theories of technology, such as Bernard Stiegler's or Heideggerian inspired theories on technology that approach technology not as a means, but as as assemblage of human related interactions, agency, and so on. So, what would be an Ilyenkovian critique on those theories, such as Hugh Huis, Bernard Stiegler, and so on? And a second remark is that I think it's just an opinion, and you can expand further on it, is that I think one of the main limitations in the discussion, or not your limitation, I mean, I'm speaking broadly, out of the context of Marxism, is that the relation between subjectivity and means, it is considered from some kind of individualistic understanding of subjectivity, whereas in Marxism, and especially in Ilyenkov, the subjectivity is also the humankind. So we can approach, for example, AI from, for example, as a means from the perspective of the collective human subject. And here we can find, we can detect, for example, we can determine some kind of inadequacy between the ownership of AI as a collective means of collective means of production, for example, production of knowledge and so on, of the humankind, and a private property in this kind of the means, and this kind of inadequacy result in several other contradictions. So that's it. This is my comment, and thank you very much, Kyrill.
Thanks. Yeah, and I'm going to have opposite responses. So the first comment about Heideggerian approaches is this is actually what the paper that I've shared an extract with will hopefully be, if it's accepted and after the revisions, etc. I make this argument in my thesis as well. With the Heideggerian approach, it's talking about a kind of background, which is inscrutable. So it's kind of beyond our transformation. I think what's helpful about Ilyenkov is this dialectic of subject and object. It's the sense in which actually, we as subjects can, through our purpose of activity, transform the background, or like the habitus, or whatever you want to call it. So I guess, it's the sense in which I'm more optimistic about there being a collective project through which the norms that structure us are themselves structured. That leads to the necessity for a collective subject, which, is just a promissory note. That's certainly an ambition, something I'd like to think more about. I don't yet know what that's going to look like, other than seeing AI as an opportunity for public articulation of thoughts that multiple people can look at and contribute to. Ivan.
Thanks. Very nice presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
I especially like the kind of contrast between at the beginning, that agent of precarity, that where the hype is used as basically a threat, that this is a really powerful tool and your job is in danger, to the design principles at the end, which were more like showing how we can use this kind of AI as not quite liberatory, but how we can really use it to enhance our own agency. And I kind of reflected how I use AI a lot, like Claude or ChatGPT in my own work. So that was really nice. And all the comments have been really good. But I've got two questions about the presentation. One about, you made a comment about neural networks and contradiction, how they can handle contradiction. I think so, you said. Mm-hmm. And this has come up in the previous meeting as well. So I'd just like a little bit more. Could you explain that a little bit? Because I can't quite see it. If we take something like Claude, which has basically hoovered up the internet, there's going to be contradiction in there. So how, can I not express that contradiction, or is there something else problematic? And the other question really is, maybe you've already answered it, and it was brought up by Giannis as well. At the end of your, after the design principles, you talked about participatory in AI, and you seem to be moving towards questioning, who owns and who builds these models, and raising the question of should we raise and build our own? Should society as a whole democratically build its own models? And that's kind of interesting prospect. So 2 questions for a bit more detail.
Sure, yeah. And yeah, those were very interesting and helpful. So neural net and its kind of the new cybernetics that's now taken hold can't deal with contradiction in the following way. I think the model is that it necessarily creates a representation of the world, it's a prediction, and then it measures error. Most of our engagement with the world isn't about, oh, that's an error. I think, yeah, like if I take a lick of ice cream, it's not about minimizing error. There are, yeah, kind of things that guide our activity that are not at the level of neurons doing representation. So I don't like this fact that it's like this prior moment where you have all the weights, etc. So yeah, there's certainly like interesting emergent effects, but when I say that it's not responsive to contradiction, with real life organisms, there's always a kind of discovery where my relation to something turns out to be different. So in this kind of Hegelian register where like something that was something to me turns out to be something for me, something that was for me turns out to be something to me, like the stick that's bent in water turns out to be about my image of the stick being bent in water and how the water, and then I add into my understanding, okay, this is how the water's bending my stick, etc. So I can,
Right, so you hit a contradiction, then you have to completely reframe everything.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
And and you know that probably wouldn't. Yeah, I think I can see it. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, and I totally need to think more about what it would mean to have democratic ownership of the AI models. Yeah, right now we need these huge data centers, and some people are thinking about that. But Ilyenkov is surely completely right that the danger of AI is that it's inherently kind of Stalinist. So he compares it often to this kind of Bogdanov utopian system, which he doesn't like because it necessitates concentrated top-down control, except now it can be outsourced to the cybernetic algorithm. I do think there's some potential to get around that, so including in Bogdanov, and last time Andrea spoke about how in Allende's Chile there were some attempts to think through that. But yeah, there's a lot more to be said. Ralph?
Yes, I find it difficult to really be able to imagine how alternative conceptions, can on a large scale be implemented. And to me, there's sort of two fundamental problems that we can already see, that we already have even before the latest AI hype. And those two things are, one, the vagaries of the nature of human learning and communication, and two, even trying to communicate with humans that have a certain technical expertise, the inability of them to respond to those who don't have it, and to be able to translate, let's say, what a person is trying to get at into something a question that can actually be answered by other humans who are supposed to understand humans. And you can even see this now when you are trying to, for example, get tech support, or you're dealing with the bureaucracy and filling out forms, and there's something that you don't understand, and try to get some information as to how to proceed, or if you find something in a government database that somehow seems to be off. So, for example, let's say you have a problem with one of your devices, and you're looking online, and they have automatic chats, automatic question answering, or lists of menus where if this is your problem, here's the answer, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, a lot of the time that doesn't even work, and you try to get a hold of a real human that you can talk to, which can be almost impossible. When you do, this person is not capable of really understanding what you're getting at and can't answer your question. And then you try to bump it up to another level, and ultimately, even with the technical question, of which there should be a specific answer, the ability to communicate between the layman and the expert becomes almost impossible. And the experts themselves become sort of robotic and automated in that they can only understand discrete questions that they're used to, and can't really get into the communication process that involves human learning and intuition and the vagueness of how we understand or even be able to process explicit instructions. That's already a problem. And perhaps the same when you're dealing with a government bureaucracy and you're trying to, get benefits and apply for something, and somehow the forms that you're given are not working for you, and then you try to find somebody to negotiate the process. In other words, it's already very difficult to do. Humans become more automated, and the automated systems become difficult to use because humans find it difficult interpreting what they see, even if it's reasonably explicit. And so I just really wonder what you can actually do to remedy this, given the nature of the way these things are programmed for efficiency, what they consider to be efficiency, and how you could even find a different way of doing it. I really have to wonder about this, because there's this fundamental issue of the way that we learn things, the way that we absorb information, and our ability to communicate with one another so we can understand what the other person is getting at. This kind of bothers me on a basic level that we already see, and I don't know how it could be remedied even by any alternative conceptions of how to do it.
Yeah, thanks. It's a new topic, which is certainly an interesting one. And this idea that Ilyenkov's getting at, that we have to shape our behavior to the machine for it to even be kind of so much as intelligible, is certainly happening a lot now. It's the goal of the kind of reinforcement learning you have in large language models. And certainly, I've noticed the effects that you're talking about. It's exactly because, obviously companies want to fire as many of their employees as possible. So they assume that the AI will sort things out. And right now, it's quite basic symbolic AI that's not really understanding your query properly, or generative AI that can make mistakes. So they're kind of worried about their liability there. But okay, what do we do about it? Well, it's a hard balance road, because I've also seen people, especially people from who come from minority groups where they don't have the same cultural capital, use large language models to help them to word an email to someone in a position of power. And it's that difference between, okay, are you creating a model that scaffolds your communication in a way that you can make yourself understood, or are you kind of de-skilling and kind of not developing the ways in which to actually speak to people in the first place? Well, I think that this is a design problem. I think we can design AI so that it's scaffolding for learning. I, in fact, have a job interview with that pitch on the 22nd. I think that AI can help us to, as scaffolding, to explain things, to break things down into smaller pieces, so that we can explain ourselves better to each other. But we need to be careful about what the form of that looks like when the learning is happening, versus the sort of trust, the kind of being patterned by the AI that Ilyenkov is talking about. And often it's very hard to even say that there's a difference there. Thanks.
Andres, is you, and Penny had a question as well. She put in the chat. Andres and then Lars. Penny?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I have a question which is somehow connected with the Alex Levant review of Pascanelli, A of the Master, and with this question of Giannis Ninos of this, social dimension. Because, you know that I am this kind of a devoted fan of the book Dialectical Logic, and I still have this feeling about what happened with this stack of knowledge, which is embedded in institutions, in the customs, in the tools, in the, this kind of a body of civilization, as we remember when, Ilyenkov was able to recognize, yes, that the thinking is in this, yes, area. When the AI in this kind of anti-dialectical imperialism is, narrowing our thinking about thinking to this kind of operation, yes, this is also connected with the Penny comment, yes, like what is the knowledge of AI? And then this is my question, like we know already that this language models are now cannibalize themselves. Yes, they shit internet with the stupid things, and then they learn stupid things from things they put in internet. And for me, it's the question, how to deal with this level, this kind of a humanity level. Yes, that maybe this is the real problem with the AI as a tool, that it will be this anti-dialectical pollution, yes, which reshape this, like we are able to recognize thinking when we are looking, for example, for the, I don't know, the garden or park or activity or, I don't know, library, whatever, yes, like these examples of Ilyenkov. And now what happened when we pollute a reality with AI as a helper, yes, which is this, let's say, thinking which is dialectical, means that subject is really somehow working, yes, like anthropological Hegelian Marxian approach, will be completely narrowing and disappearing. Okay.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, yeah. So it's similar contrast to what's the difference between deferring our thinking to an institution like the church or school or AI. Well, this is what the extract from the ideal that I shared is talking about. It only embodies our thinking insofar as it's then reappropriated into our practice. So yeah, I want to constantly return to the question of what is the AI doing within social practices. So to break out of this tool user dyad, the AI is materially mediating certain infrastructures and systems. We need to be able to trace the transformations that it is a part of within our activity. And yeah, I agree that it's kind of designed to be a fetishism agent, engine, and as a machine for its own fetishism, surrounded by the mythology of its own mystical aura. It's very hard to see what it might be like to draw on it rather than having it shape us. But yeah, that's the challenge.
Lars, and then Alex again, unless somebody else who hasn't spoken wants to come in.
Okay, this is a kind of specific question, that I've been thinking about for a long time, and it's about the representation. You're talking a lot about representation and models, and if you go back to the architects who will build a house, and uses a drawing, we say that drawing is a representation of the house. But at that very moment, when you use the drawing, there is no house. The house is to be built. So the question here is really, what is the representation of? It seems to me like the drawing is the actual object of the activity, and the representation, is it the representation of itself, or what is it the representation about? I think Ilyenkov have some interesting discussions about this, and I would like to see this discussion articulated and enlarged in some way, you know. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I don't think the object is just the drawing itself. So yeah, it's brought into a representation relation by the activity. So yeah, in a different tradition, also drawing on Hegel, the philosopher Sebastian Rödl gives an example about food. So it's quite hard actually to define food, because what makes something food is very much to do with our social practices. So we have something that is an item of food, but when I kind of go and I want to find some food, I'm dealing with kind of food in its ideal form. And I'm actually, when we've structured a kind of food industry that produces certain things as food, in the same way, yeah, ages ago when we were talking last, I gave this example of the caveman taking the club to be a weapon. Well, the caveman, when the club exists ideally as a weapon, let's say the club breaks, in replacing the club, certain things are going to feel as though they match they're fulfilling the purpose of being a club. So when they're being selected or molded or used, there's this kind of ideal sense of the object in the sense of like what the activity is structured towards, which is different to any particular representation of it. Andrea?
Yeah, thanks. Very nice talk. I mean, it's been ideas we've been discussing for some time, but it's nice to see them framed in this rigorous way. Someone mentioned Pasquinelli's Eye of the Master a couple of 5-10 minutes ago, and this made me think. So in that book, he also makes Marxian criticism of AI, and what he relies on is this Marxian concept that is found in the Grundrisse, the general intellect, which was then very important for the post-operaismo tradition, in the Italian post-operaismo tradition in the 70s. But the way he uses it is mostly critical, in the sense he's using the concept of general intellect to apply it to, he has a genealogy, but it works very well, especially in his new project as applied to large language models, because they're basically collecting general knowledge and implement it mechanically. But so what he's doing is essentially using the concept of general intellect to venture a criticism of all these sort of science fiction-y vision of AI that you were referring to at the beginning of the talk. But as far as I remember, in the book, at least, he doesn't really have a positive story to tell of how we can use those tools in a way that is not alienating, but emancipatory. So I was wondering, and I see all the stuff we've been talking about already, and the things you were talking about today, I think as a very positive aspect of really trying to develop that positive story. So I was wondering whether you have thoughts about like this idea of general intellect, or whether they play a role in your thinking about these issues, or whether they don't at all.
Yeah, it doesn't at all, because I think I've already, when I read Eye of the Master, I was kind of already kind of too steeped in Ilyenkov to reconfigure kind of what he's talking about. I think, yeah, I can certainly see how it's a promising concept, but I also find it helpful. Ilyenkov in Dialectical Logic criticizes Hegel for this idea that there's a historic accumulation of knowledge. So he's criticizing the idea that there's just this universal Geist, and then all knowledge is adding to Geist. He's saying that's like accumulation of surplus value. He instead says that knowledge is accumulated to the extent that it's productive in a particular form of life. Well, yeah, in specific like life activity. So, I guess mode of production, you could say, to broaden it out. So then it's general intellect in the sense that it helps the people within that life activity intelligently engage with the world. I worry about because if we call it general intellect, I think it plays too much into AI's own ideology of what it's doing and accumulating knowledge and being a final encyclopedia.
Thanks, Kyrill. Maybe we should be thinking of Oscar Wilde's famous quote, "The price of everything and the value of nothing," when we think of these things. Well, unless there's another question out there, or would anyone else like to make a short contribution? Any other points? Penny's got a hand. Got to unmute, Penny. Still muted.
That's it, got it. Now I put a question about, what is the status of knowledge that is not on the World Wide Web? Because a huge quantity of knowledge is not on the World Wide Web. So, like, for example, if I was to ask for a definition of love, the World Wide Web would deliver something that completely excluded my relationship with my husband, because that doesn't exist in any form on the World Wide Web. So you get a definition of love that was excluding huge quantities of knowledge and experience and practical activity of human beings living together. That's all. Also, concern about the circularity of AI, that if AI refers to itself, eventually people will use knowledge that they gain from using the encyclopedia-like nature of AI to write more stuff on the World Wide Web, which will then become part of the AI searches. And so you end up with a circularity of knowledge, which can, it seems to me, exclude the new, the novel, the unexpected, the reckless, and so on. And also, in particular, exclude that knowledge, that vast quantity of human knowledge, experience, and understanding, which is not on the World Wide Web.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's offering you what is conventional, what you're likely to find unobjectionable, and yeah, as you say, it's not. Certainly, if we're talking about large language models, it is language. It's not traded. It's not trained on our gestures and the situations in which that language is operating. Although things like literature, of course, has been assembled in ways that we find moving, so it can still be moving, but it's still missing something, as you say. Thanks.
But Alex,
Okay.
Alex,
All right.
Is it okay if I quickly jump in? I apologize. I know I spoke.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Alex.
I'll keep it brief. I think the point that that Penny is raising is a crucial one, and it's I mean, it has both a political dimension to it and also a technical dimension to it. On the political side, we have no idea how what data is being used to train these models. So just kind of beyond the technical limitations of the World Wide Web and so on, the actual curatorial decisions that are made by the companies that are training these models are completely opaque to us, and they'll continue to be so until we have our own methods of training them ourselves, until there's some kind of a public version of AI. Right now, that doesn't exist, and this is one of the biggest difficulties. However, and you can see it in much more pronounced when you compare the different models out there. You can start to see the differences in how they respond to you. And so these curatorial decisions are crucial, and this technology will be incredibly limited until that becomes not only transparent but under public control. Because right now we have absolutely no idea how these things are being created. At the same time, it's worthwhile reflecting on what our expectations are and should be. These are not going to be some kind of, as I think, as Kyrill rightly pointed out, like almost like oracles that can tell us everything about everything. Of course, whatever they reveal, there'll also be something that they occlude. Think of a telescope, for instance. It allows you to see something far away, but what can you see close up if only you look through a telescope? It occludes what's close up. Same thing here. It won't reveal everything about the world, but it can be used as a tool that reveals something about something. And if used appropriately, it can be very, very useful. But coming back to the technical difficulties, this is something that's really quite interesting because in terms of the forefront of research right now in this technology is an attempt to move beyond data sets that are focused on text and images, and also to move into the physical world. And this is being taken up by primarily by Jan LeCun he's the chief AI researcher at Meta. But Meta, as we know, is one of these wonderful corporations out there who has a particular agenda, right? And so the technological limits are real, but they are being there's some interesting innovations that are being done on that front. But I think really the main bottleneck, quite frankly, is the political one, because what is driving that innovation aren't the questions that we're exploring here, but something else altogether. And I think Kyrill and others have explained that. Right. So I think that's just something to put on the table here, that I think sometimes our expectations of these models are far in excess of what they can deliver, and then we become overly disappointed, thinking that these things are something other than what they can be. But there are real uses here, and I think that the corporate world is zeroed in on and is profiteering from, and we are only starting to begin to kind of catch up to it. And we're still largely limited by a very defensive posture, thinking about this technology as a way how to protect ourselves from its consequences, rather than how to actually control it, shape it, and deploy it for our own interests.
Thank you, Alex. I'd just like to say I agree very much with what Alex has just said, because Kyrill's presentation is very important, because there's so little work done on this, as far as I can see anyway, from this very political point of view that we on the whole have been sharing here. The ownership of these systems is crucial, of course, as you've just said, and it's not not only Musk, but these AI giants, or the people who are developing AI, most of them were at the Trump inauguration. We mustn't forget that, and the whole way in which it's extremely exploitative, and not just of people's brains, but people's bodies and low-paid labor, and that's completely hidden, really, from the users. as it's completely non-transparent. So therefore, to imagine and to develop an alternative to that is much more challenging than just saying how bad it is. It's easy for us to say how bad it is and how dangerous it is, and potential is totally contradictory, as we know. So I think continuing this discussion is going to be important, because we're only at the frontier here, really. And with that, I think.
Thanks.
And then, Kyrill, do you want to make some comments